I never expected my life to change the way it did, all because of a secret my uncle kept hidden in the back of his closet. At the time, I was just a college student crashing at his place for the summer, grateful for the free rent while I interned downtown. He was always the eccentric one in the family, never married, always traveling, and with a house full of odd trinkets from around the world. I thought I knew him well, but as it turned out, there were layers to him I never imagined. It started on a rainy afternoon when I was rummaging through his study, looking for an old book he'd mentioned. The shelves were cluttered with leather-bound journals and faded maps, but what caught my eye was the small, locked chest tucked behind a stack of photo albums. Curiosity got the better of me, and after a few minutes of searching, I found the key hidden inside an empty cigar box. When I opened the chest, my breath caught in my throat. Inside were neatly folded garments, silky blouses, delicate lace lingerie, a pair of sheer stockings still in their packaging. Beneath them lay a wig of soft auburn curls and a small makeup palette, barely used. My first instinct was to shut it immediately, my face burning with embarrassment. But something made me pause. This wasn't just some random collection, it was personal, intimate. And it belonged to my uncle. For days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I watched him carefully, trying to reconcile the man I knew with the secret I'd uncovered. He was always so confident, so effortlessly masculine. How did this fit into his life? The more I dwelled on it, the more I realized how little I understood about identity, about the masks people wear. And then, against all logic, I found myself drawn back to that chest. One evening when he was out, I locked myself in the guest room and carefully unfolded one of the blouses. The fabric was cool against my skin as I held it up, my heart pounding. Before I could talk myself out of it, I slipped it on. The sensation was electric, an unfamiliar thrill racing through me as I looked in the mirror. The way the silk draped over my shoulders, the way it made me feel different. Not worse, not wrong, just different. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind buzzed with questions, with possibilities. Was this just curiosity? Or was it something deeper, something I'd buried for years? The next day, I went back to the chest. This time, I tried the stockings, then the wig, then a touch of makeup. Each step felt like unlocking a door I hadn't known existed. In the mirror, a stranger stared back at me, someone softer, freer. And for the first time, I didn't want to look away. Weeks passed, and my secret experiments became a ritual. I learned how to apply eyeliner, how to walk in heels, how to tuck my hair just right under the wig. The more I explored, the more natural it felt, as if I were rediscovering a part of myself that had been waiting in the shadows. But guilt gnawed at me. This wasn't my secret to uncover, and if my uncle found out, what would he think? Then one night, he came home early. I was in the middle of adjusting a dress when I heard the front door open. Panic shot through me. I scrambled to strip everything off, shoving the clothes back into the chest, but it was too late. He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. My stomach dropped, but instead of anger, he just sighed and sat down on the bed. "I wondered if you'd find it," he said quietly. And then, to my shock, he told me his own story, how he'd struggled for years, how he'd found solace in those moments of transformation, even if he never shared them with anyone. "It's not something to be ashamed of," he said, "but it's also not something you should have to hide." That conversation changed everything. With his encouragement, I began exploring my identity openly, first in private, then in safe spaces he introduced me to. I met others like me, people who understood the joy of embracing who you truly are. And slowly, piece by piece, I realized this wasn't just a phase or a curiosity. It was me. By the end of that summer, I wasn't just borrowing from my uncle's chest anymore. I had my own wardrobe, my own style, my own confidence. And when I finally came out to my friends and family, it was my uncle who stood by my side, a knowing smile on his face. Sometimes, the biggest transformations begin with the smallest discoveries. And sometimes, the person you least expect holds the key to who you're meant to be. The months that followed were a whirlwind of self-discovery, fear, and exhilaration. With my uncle's guidance, I began to understand that what I had stumbled upon wasn't just a fleeting fascination, it was an awakening. He became my confidant, my mentor in ways I never could have predicted. He taught me things that weren't just about clothes or makeup, but about courage, about the quiet strength it takes to be honest with yourself in a world that often demands conformity. One evening, he took me to a small boutique downtown, a place tucked between a coffee shop and a used bookstore, its unassuming exterior hiding a treasure trove inside. The moment we stepped in, the owner, a woman with sharp eyes and a warm smile, greeted my uncle like an old friend. "So this is the niece you mentioned," she said, looking me over with an appraising but kind gaze. I flushed, suddenly self-conscious, but my uncle just chuckled and nudged me forward. That day, I was measured, fitted, and given my first real pieces. Not borrowed, not hidden, but mine. A tailored blouse that hugged my frame just right, a skirt that swished softly when I walked, a pair of ankle boots that made me stand taller. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see someone playing dress up. I saw me. But the outside world wasn't as forgiving as my uncle's house. The first time I ventured out dressed as myself, I was a nervous wreck. My hands trembled as I applied my lipstick, my stomach twisting into knots. What if someone recognized me? What if they laughed? Or worse? My uncle squeezed my shoulder and said, "The first step is always the hardest, but you don't have to do it alone." We went to a quiet cafe across town, a place where no one knew us. Every glance from a stranger sent my heart racing. Every murmur of conversation made me wonder if they were talking about me. But as the minutes passed and nothing happened, no stares, no whispers, I began to relax. The barista handed me my latte with a polite smile, and in that small, ordinary moment, I realized something profound. The world didn't end just because I was different. Of course, not every day was that easy. There were moments of doubt, nights where I lay awake wondering if I was making a mistake. I worried about my parents, my friends. What would they say? Would they still love me if they knew? My uncle listened patiently whenever I voiced these fears, never dismissing them, but always reminding me that the people who truly mattered would stay. And then came the day I decided to tell my best friend, Jess. We had known each other since high school, had shared every secret, except this one. I invited her over, my stomach in knots, rehearsing what I would say 100 times in my head. When she arrived, I was still dressed in my usual jeans and hoodie, too afraid to show her the real me just yet. But as we talked, as the words finally spilled out, her reaction wasn't shock or disgust. It was curiosity, then excitement. "Wait, so you've been hiding this all this time?" she said, leaning forward. "Can I see?" And just like that, my fear melted. I slipped into the bedroom and changed, my hands steadier than they'd ever been. When I stepped back out, Jess's eyes lit up. "Oh my God, you look amazing," she breathed. Then, with a grin, she added, "We are so going shopping." That was the beginning of a new chapter. With Jess by my side, I started experimenting more, finding my style, my voice. She helped me with makeup tricks, took me to LGBTQ+ meetups, where I met people who had walked this path before me. Slowly, I began to introduce the real me to others. Some accepted me without question, others needed time. But with each person who stayed, I grew stronger. My parents were the hardest. I waited until I was back at school, until I had built up enough confidence to face their reaction. When I finally told them over a video call, their silence was deafening. My mother's face was unreadable. My father just stared. But then, after what felt like an eternity, my mother sighed and said, "We don't understand, but we love you. And we'll learn." It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Now, a year later, I look back and marvel at how much has changed. I live full-time as myself. My wardrobe no longer split between two identities. My uncle and I are closer than ever. Sometimes, we even go out together, two kindred spirits who found each other in the most unexpected way. And as for the chest in the back of his closet, it's still there. But now, it's not a secret. It's a reminder of where I started, of the courage it took to begin, and of the beautiful, complicated, exhilarating journey that lies ahead. The first time I saw her in the mirror, truly saw her, was on an ordinary Tuesday evening. I had just come home from my internship, exhausted but buzzing with a quiet excitement. My uncle was out of town, leaving me the rare gift of an empty house and uninterrupted time. The chest in his closet no longer held secrets between us. It had become something of a shared treasure, with new additions from both of us tucked inside. That night, I decided to try something different. Instead of just borrowing pieces here and there, I wanted to put together an entire look, one that felt cohesive, intentional. I slipped into a sage green sundress my uncle had helped me pick out, the fabric light against my skin. The wig, now freshly styled into soft waves, settled perfectly around my shoulders. Makeup came easier now. A touch of foundation, mascara that made my eyes pop, a rosy lip tint that looked natural but polished. But it was when I stepped into the pair of low heels, my first real purchase, that something shifted. The click of them against the hardwood floor sounded like confidence. I turned to the full-length mirror and froze. There she was. Not a boy playing dress-up. Not a hesitant experiment. Her.
Me.
The person I'd always been underneath, finally stepping into the light. I don't know how long I stood there, just staring. It wasn't about the clothes or the makeup anymore. It was the way my shoulders relaxed, the way my smile came easier, the way my reflection fit in a way it never had before. A quiet certainty settled over me. This is who I am. The next morning, I woke up with a resolve I hadn't expected. I reached for my phone and scrolled to a name I'd been too nervous to contact before, Dr. Alvarez, a gender therapist my uncle had mentioned months ago. My thumb hovered over the call button for a second before I pressed it. 2 weeks later, I sat in her office, twisting my hands in my lap. "I think I'm transgender," I whispered, the words tasting both foreign and achingly right. Dr. Alvarez smiled gently. "Tell me more." And for the first time, I did. The months that followed were a blur of self-discovery, therapy sessions, researching hormones, joining a local transgender support group where I met people whose stories mirrored mine in ways that made me feel less alone. Jess became my fiercest ally, accompanying me to appointments and even helping me pick out my new name, Lena. My parents, to their credit, tried. There were strained dinners and awkward questions, but they never shut me out. My mother even surprised me one weekend by showing up with a delicate silver necklace, a small, dangling butterfly. "For your metamorphosis," she said, her voice thick with emotion. But the biggest moment came on my birthday. My uncle handed me a wrapped box with a mischievous grin. Inside was a passport, my passport, but with my new name and gender marker. "For all the places you'll go," he said. I burst into tears. Now, as I write this, I'm sitting in my own apartment, no longer a guest in someone else's life, but the author of my own. The chest from my uncle's closet sits at the foot of my bed, its contents spilling over with colors and textures that tell the story of my becoming. Sometimes when I'm feeling nostalgic, I open it and pull out that very first blouse, the one I stole glimpses of myself in. I've kept it all these years, not as a secret, but as a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary transformations begin in the quietest of moments, a locked door, a held breath, a heartbeat of courage. And that the person you're meant to be is always, always worth becoming. The first time I introduced myself as Lena in public, my voice shook. It was at a small bookstore cafe, the kind with overstuffed armchairs and the comforting smell of old paper. The barista, a college student with a nose ring and a patient smile, had asked for my name to call out when my latte was ready. I hesitated only a second before saying it. Lena. The word felt like a key turning in a lock. When she handed me the cup with Lena scrawled in Sharpie, I held onto it like a talisman, tracing the letters with my thumb. That moment became the first of many small, ordinary miracles. As the seasons changed, so did I. Hormones softened my edges in ways I hadn't anticipated, not just physically, but emotionally too. I cried more easily, laughed more freely. My reflection became less of a stranger and more of an old friend. My uncle joked that I was blossoming, and in a way, it was true. For the first time, I wasn't fighting against my own skin. Work was its own hurdle. My internship ended, and with it came the daunting task of job hunting as me. I spent nights agonizing over resumes, torn between listing my dead name for professional continuity or starting fresh. In the end, Jess helped me draft a simple, honest email to my references. I've recently transitioned, and I'd be grateful if you could use my correct name moving forward. The responses surprised me. Most were supportive, if awkwardly worded. Only one employer ghosted me afterward. I decided I didn't want to work for them anyway. Then there was dating. The first time someone flirted with me as Lena, I nearly choked on my drink. It was at a queer poetry night, a soft-spoken artist who liked the way I tied my scarf. I fumbled through the conversation, equal parts thrilled and terrified. Later, Jess teased me mercilessly. "You're a natural," she said, grinning. "Now stop overthinking and let people adore you." But not all encounters were kind. There were the stairs and restrooms, the man at the bus stop who muttered something under his breath, the dates who fetishized or questioned me. Each one stung, but I refused to fold inward. Instead, I learned to armor myself with community. The trans women who shared survival tips over group texts, the drag queen at the local bar who taught me how to tuck with theatrical flair, my uncle's steadfast presence. One winter evening, I found him in his study, flipping through an old photo album. He gestured for me to join him. The pages were filled with pictures of him in his 20s, traveling, laughing, always impeccably dressed. But tucked between the pages were other photos. My uncle in a sundress on a secluded beach, in a wig at what looked like a house party, his arm around someone I didn't recognize. "I wasn't ready to live like you are," he said quietly. "But God, I'm proud that you can." I rested my head on his shoulder. We sat like that for a long time, the past and present folding together. The following spring, I stood in front of a judge to legally change my name. The courtroom was nearly empty. Just Jess, my uncle, and a bored-looking clerk. When the judge pronounced the order, it was so anticlimactic I almost laughed. But then Jess handed me a bouquet of irises. "They mean wisdom," she whispered, and my uncle pressed a key into my palm, a spare to his house. "Always your home," he said. That night, we celebrated with too much wine and a disastrous attempt at baking a cake. Now, as I zip up the dress for my first Pride parade, a riot of rainbow tulle that Jess insisted was essential, I think about that locked chest, how far its shadow has stretched. My uncle adjusts his tie in the mirror beside me, his own outfit a dapper lavender suit. "Ready?" he asks. Outside, the streets are alive with music and laughter. Strangers hug like old friends. A little girl with a trans flag cape dances in a sprinkler spray. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm stepping into someone else's life. I'm just stepping forward. Hand in hand with my chosen family, I march into the sunlight. No longer a secret, no longer a question, but Lena, fully and unapologetically myself. And that, more than anything else, is the miracle. Thank you so much for watching till now. It means the world to have you here. This community is all about empowering each other and celebrating the incredible journeys of everyone on their path to living authentically. If you're ever feeling lost or alone, remember you have a whole family here for you. Hit that subscribe button. Smash that like button. And let's keep inspiring each other, sending you all the love and strength in the world. Until next time, live your life by your rules.